want to talk to you about someone. She was one of the most recognized faces in television news for more than around 20 years on Good Morning America. Then she was let go at 46. After that, she had not one set of twins, but two sets of twins in her 50s. And then after that, she got cancer. And every time, she came back stronger. Now, I'm with Joan Lunden today, and what she's going to share with us, ladies, I think is going to make you look at things a little differently. I mean, if you've ever thought that perhaps the world had passed you by or maybe a window had closed, stay with me on this one. Great to have you, Joan.
It's great to be with you.
Well, let me tell you, I really enjoyed your book, and I have it right here, so I'm going to pull it up. Thank you. Love it. I got to tell you, I whizzed through it on audio as well. And it taught me a lot about resilience, and a lot about things I never knew about you that really were very impressive, and I respect you so much more at this point. But why this book and why now?
Well, it's my 11th book, but most of the books have been about chapters of my life, about my breast cancer. One was A Bend in the Road is Not the End of the Road. That was dealing with change after leaving GMA. This is anybody who got to live the extraordinary life that I did. And my husband often says to me, you forget that you lived such an extraordinary life, because to you it was ordinary. But there was nothing ordinary about it. I felt compelled to tell the story. And not just all the things that I got to do in my life, all the highlights, but the story of the challenge of breaking into a business that was an all-white male industry in 1973. At a time, by the way, when the woman couldn't even get a credit card in her own name. I mean, it wasn't just the TV industry that was so... And I hope this book gets in the hands of lots of young women so they get a sense of how much life has changed in a pretty short period of time. And then I wanted to... I wrote it first and turned it in, and my publisher said, this is an autobiography. It's like a compilation of all the things you've done. It's Joan Lunden reporting on Joan Lunden's life. Your readers are going to want a memoir. They're going to want you to take them into your life. And I'm a voracious reader, and I love books. Why do I love books? Because they take me to another time, another place, somebody else's life, and you just get to get in and live their life. And I thought, I want to write a book like the books I like. So I teamed up with a memoirist and went back and rewrote it. Took another year and a half. And that's how I wanted the book to read. I wanted to take them into the situation. Of course, by doing this, you had to kill 6 other great stories. But I wanted to take them into those moments where I had to make decisions, where I felt vulnerable, where I had to put my big girl pants on and do something about something. And then, of course, leaving GMA, I really wanted to talk about life after GMA, because I've gotten to do so many things that to me gave me opportunities to make my mark on this world. The advocacy I've done. And I don't think I could have written this book until now, is that I could look at the whole thing and say, okay, yeah, that 25 years, that was big and brilliant and amazing. But the last 25 years had given me a pretty extraordinary chance to do a lot of things as well.
Yeah, you just struck a nerve, because I remember, and I was thinking, you couldn't even have your own credit card. I think it was 1975, 1980, when you didn't have to have your husband's name on a card, which blows me away.
1972, right as I was sticking my foot in the door, was when they passed the Something Credit Fairness Act. And finally you could, because otherwise it had to either be your father or your husband. It's hard to imagine that. You couldn't open a bank account. You couldn't buy a house. You couldn't do a lot of things.
Wasn't that long ago. So one of the things that I got from your book is that you really stepped into a room that during that time you didn't belong. They didn't take women newscasters very seriously. How did you work to prove yourself?
I'm a really good student. I whizzed through school, skipped a grade, started college when I was 16. I've always been a good student. And I think that boded well for me. I started in the weather department, but I was all over that newsroom, asking questions, helping people, doing research, doing whatever, making myself valuable. And that's always my advice to young people. If you go in somewhere, don't just sit around and wait for someone to tell you what to do, to do something. Like, make yourself valuable so that they need you. And that's how I got hired, full time. At a time when, and there still was a lot of, I had mentors too. Find those mentors in your life. People who know more than you, have good experience, who you can learn from.
I couldn't agree more. And being an avid learner, never stop learning, find mentors. And one of those, speaking of which, and now I'm not sure, I gathered from the book, I loved how Barbara Walters gave you this little piece of advice, told you don't try to go in there and fight for equality, but I want to hear in your own words what she taught you.
That was 1980. I'd only been at GM a very short time, and I never got any big interviews, but Barbara Walters asked for me to do it. So I got to interview Barbara Walters, and she had been my idol. And she said, if you fight for equality, that time has not come, not just here in our industry, but in society in general. And if you do that and you push, you're going to end up where your predecessors ended up, right out the door. Just take every small assignment that they are willing to give you and make those shine, make them a gem, and they'll have to notice you. And that's really, I follow that advice. And that is how I kind of work my way up. And every now and then, that I would get a little bit juicier assignment, and I just really make sure that it was really great. And that just builds their confidence in you. And finally, when the time came, it was right toward I was with David Hartman for 10 years. And then they came to an agreement to end their agreement, David and ABC. And I'm the one that fought for Charlie Gibson. I really thought he would be perfect. David Hartman had been an actor who played the everyman's man, but Charlie Gibson was the everyman's man. He had a little boyishness about him, and yet he was really smart. And so he came in, and I tell the story that he walked into my office when he first came in to put his books in his new office and said, let's show America that a man and a woman can do a news program like this 50-50, that we can do it as equals.
God bless him.
And I said, I'll take that deal. Now, I'm going to give you a little tidbit that's not in the book.
Okay.
We all got together for, I think we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of ABC. And we went out to dinner, and Charlie said, so I love the book, but I got to tell you a story. You tell the story about me coming in and saying, let's do the show 50-50. I didn't ever tell you that on my way in, when I first walked in the door, all the executives called me in and said, all right, you have to immediately establish yourself as the alpha male. Establish yourself with Joan, with the audience, with the staff, as the alpha male. And he said, I looked at them and said, that's what the show has been for the last 10 years. I don't think that's what the audience wants. And that's what I don't want to do that. And he got up, walked out, and walked into my office and made that deal with me. And I said, I'm learning this 40 years later? He was a great partner.
Yeah, that's a wonderful sort of tidbit to give, and I appreciate that. One of the things that really struck me in the book is how you as a mom would wake up at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Pack Jamie, I believe her was at name your first
the crib. Don't wake up, don't wake up, don't wake. Let me change your diaper. Don't wake up. And you get in the car so I could breastfeed and read the script, read an 80-page script, and get in, and then she'd be knocked out. I'd put her in her little crib, and she had a dressing room right next to mine, and start hair and makeup with producers coming in. And I'm not going to say it was easy. It wasn't easy. It was certainly unprecedented.
Yeah, that's what I felt like. You were really pushing through some ceilings for us back then. And I do believe, and I did kind of read this about you, you probably were the first sort of mom influencer or momfluencer, because you paved the way for us.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, I was not like a gregarious, outspoken, ardent, young feminist woman, Robert, at all. I was very stay in my place, kind of timid, and Like, just edge your way in, do the best job you can, advance a little. And that's how I was taking it. So, I wasn't this strident feminist at a young age. I just happened to get a call from my agent that said I had the job at GMA host. And 20 minutes later, get the call from my gynecologist, you're pregnant. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to have to figure out how to do this. And I figured out how to do it.
I think that's one of the things as well I learned from you. And I think anyone who has a moment, it is probably one of the better books that I've read and enjoyed from a woman's perspective, especially going back from the 80s and kind of what you went through. But let me ask you this, because it took you a while to go out and really tell the true story about GMA and your departure. And you were in the prime. 46 is the prime of working. What did you have to unlearn about success to be able to reinvent?
That you have to duplicate what you had, or that you have to top it. There was some young snotty little guy, reporter, I remember, that said, "Gee, Joan, how are you ever going to top this?" But that did kind of live in the back of my head. But I called the book Life Beyond the Script because I didn't follow the script. And I had a couple of big opportunities, and I talk about them in the book, that I didn't lean into. I mean, first of all, I think I was just completely exhausted after 20 years of getting up at 3:30. But I also kind of left myself an opening to what else I wanted in my life. I had big changes coming my way in my personal life. I'd met a man I knew I wanted to spend my life with. He had never had children, and he ran summer camps for kids. I knew he'd want children. We decided to have children together. So I was really, transforming my personal life in the most wonderful way. And I wasn't really willing for the trade-offs that I'd been making all those years in that demanding role. And so I kind of opened myself up to, there are other ways that I can do this. Nobody probably understands. I did 10 shows after leaving GMA, but they were all small health-related shows mostly. And they just weren't on every morning, in everybody's living room. But they were all meaningful, and they all kind of pushed me into a lot of advocacy roles. And I found incredible satisfaction, a lot of self-fulfillment in each one of those. So, I mean, from the time I left GMA, I don't know how many times I kind of reinvented my career, but I kept reinventing it over and over. And I finally came to realize, all these other chapters have really been pretty great. I don't think until I could have written this book, though, until now, when I can kind of look back at the whole thing and say those 25 years that most people know about, yeah, they were fantastic, big, brilliant. But these 25 years have been incredibly meaningful as well.
Well, I love I loved how you started each chapter with different quotes, but I do love some of your philosophies. And one of that was, you can't get fired from your gift.
They can take you out of a job, but they can't fire you from your gift. And if people just remember that, because we live in a world where people are going to be losing jobs right and left. And they're going to have to be reinventing themselves, young, middle, old. And everybody keep the idea that keep your mind open, keep your heart open. Understand that you still have your skill set just because you don't have that job. And by the way, don't just think that's your only skill set. Think about all the other things that you might be really good at if you just opened yourself up to it and you just tried. Because people are going to have to do that. They're going to have to take their skills and their talents and learn how to use them over a broad range of industries in order to keep reinventing themselves. So I think probably as much as sharing, the breaking barriers all throughout my television industry, the stories of reinvention and managing that and how I approached it and navigated it, to me, that's also maybe even more important part of my book in today's world.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, especially with AI. Every day I start to shudder because something else comes up, But did you always have that sort of confidence as a child? Where did you get that resilient attitude?
I think my parents raised a pretty confident young kid, and they were always putting their confidence in. They had great confidence in me, and all as positive affirmations, but not just, oh, you're going to be really great. It was like, you have a mission in life, and that's to go out and discover the world and discover how people live and find out how you can make your own mark on this life. And that was kind of like my edict, my challenge. And so I think that was the tape recorder that ran in the back of my head. And I guess it's part of me that I put my foot on the accelerator and pretty much lived my life at full speed from a very young age. It was a lot of fun, but some of it whizzed by. Like, I swear to God, and trying to write this book, I'd go to YouTube and say, oh yeah, I really was in that country. Then I go to my timeline and say, oh, I really actually was in like 14 countries in that year. I mean, I was constantly having to do timeline and who was president. I mean, it took me a long time just to fact check all the timeline of my career and my life. And I always put a lot of pictures in the book because I think people are used to consuming me in a visual way. So every one of my books, I've always put tons of pictures. I think there's over 100 pictures. But then one day I got this idea and I said, wait a minute. Since I was 23 years old, most of my life is on videotape. Like, everything I've done is on video. And I called up my attorney and I said, can I put video in my next book? He said, well, how would you do that? And I said, I could put QR codes like throughout the book, and then they could like put their phone over it and open it up, or if they're on their iPad, they could hit it. And he said, well, do you own the video? I said, it's all on YouTube. And I have no idea how it all got on YouTube because I didn't put it there. So all throughout the book, if you open up, here's the end of a chapter. I always put the QR codes at the end of the chapter so I didn't interrupt the actual literary story. But after you read all about something, then all of a sudden, poof, it opens up to the actual video story. And so it was really fun doing that. And I've heard from a lot of people that they love that. I don't know if you call it interactive or...
Yeah, that's interactive. That's like an interactive experience. And everybody is into experience these days. Everything's experiential. So I think that is terrific. One of the things...
First, in case you hadn't noticed, I really like being first at things.
That's amazing. What I wanted to go back to is your dad a little bit. Now, listen, I had no idea of his demise and how that all played out. And then your mom and your whole lives sort of changed. But you were originally thinking of being a doctor.
Oh, my God. All my years. Until I was, going into college, I thought for sure I was going to be a doctor. My dad was a cancer surgeon. He saved lives. Everywhere we went, people would put their arms around him and, Doc, thanks for saving my life. I wanted to be that. I wanted to be just like him. But he was also an avid private pilot. And he crashed when I was only 13 years old. He was only 51, coming back from speaking at a big cancer convention. And I think when he died, I think my conviction was only made that much stronger. But then I went to work in a hospital right before I went to college. And it was there that I discovered that scalpels probably weren't going to be part of my life. And I kind of had to let go of that dream. I started studying psychology. That was kind of as close as I could get to medicine. And by the way, the psychology, I'm sure has served me well. But interestingly, you do see this recurring theme kind of throughout the book.
Well,
and by the way, when I got diagnosed with breast cancer, like decades later, I had this epiphany. And I was like, oh my God, I always wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. I always wanted to take the torch from him and run with it. I just had this most amazing gift dropped in my lap, which is kind of hard to say about a breast cancer diagnosis. But all of a sudden I realized I can go out and learn as much as I can about breast cancer. I can take my camera into every appointment and I can share it with women. And it became a little bit of an obsession with me, but it completely changed the trajectory of my career. I became very much an advocate in the breast cancer world.
We're going to get to that in one second, but I want to touch on something from a personal perspective. You were under the microscope a lot. At times I loved your girl scenario. You had to be very brave, vulnerable. You would put yourself out there. You don't know if it's going to go well or not. Then, you're in this fishbowl of being on GMA. You gracefully, and I really enjoyed the story because I give you huge kudos there. I don't know if I could have been that gracious, but you were right in your decision. It was definitely a best way, to kind of how you moved on. But how do you, stay so rooted in your choices, right? You go on to have children at a little bit of a later age, and people are always saying this and that. When people come back and say whatever it is publicly they want to say, how do you stay so rooted in your choices and saying, I'm not listening to that. This is my life?
A lot of pretty level-headed, straight shooter kind of. I don't think any of my choices were cockamamie. They were all well thought out, but they were all scrutinized. People look at celebrity today, and it's so idealized and fantasized, and especially young people. They're just fed this constant feed of how great it is to be famous, and there's a trade-off. And people don't really know the trade-off. I sometimes wonder how people would feel if they, all of a sudden, were going to get a ton of letters, or today they'd be emails on a constant feed, scrutinizing every nuance of your existence, your hair, your eyes, your lipstick, your clothes, your weight, your choices, the way you parent, the way you get married, the way you get divorced, everything. Everything is up for public consumption. And in today's world, of course, it can be done anonymously. So I don't suffer from it as much now as I did back then when I was really in the public eye. But people don't realize I had libel lawyers on speed dial to protect me from what the tabloids were saying. Sometimes my kids would say, don't worry. I remember one time, one of the tabloids said she was seen leaving a party, an LA party with LL Cool J. And my kid said, don't worry, Mom. No one will believe that. Everyone knows you're not that cool.
I love that.
I was constantly having to protect myself. And I had to have attorneys traveling all over to prisons. People don't realize that there are these not so great people in prisons that would sit and watch you. And they would obsess over you. And then they would write you these scary letters of what they were going to do to you, how they were going to kill you, and I had to have attorneys at every one of those hearings all over the country. That's like just the other side of celebrity. And it's things that big celebrities today have to put up with all the time. But you don't hear about that side of it. You just see oh my God, look at the car they have. Look at the house they have.
It's so funny you say that. Now, I've had nowhere near sort of the public sort of life that you have, but I was a DJ at one point for a love song show. And do you know where I got the most letters from? People in prison. It was the darndest thing.
Oh my God, it was relentless. Like, of course, I got dossiers all the time, help me get out. And you feel terrible because there's nothing you can do with those. And because, I'm sure that innocent and guilt both said those, I don't know. But it's the threats. And I will tell you, I actually still have a folder right over there in my file cabinet called, If You Never See Me Again, Start Your Search Here. That's the title of the folder. And it still lives over there in that folder, just in case.
Yeah. People don't realize that.
And so that's the other thing you give up. But that's the other thing you give up. You give up that sense of security and safety. And some of the things I enjoy about my life today is that I'm far enough away from it that I'm not so worried about it. I was always worried about the impact it would have on my children. And quite honestly, you give up your anonymity. And that might sound like weird to somebody listening, but I love it when I go to a restaurant, a young, hip restaurant. We know that at least half the people there are so young that they don't know who the hell I am. And it's great because you can eat and here, and I'm anonymous. And it may sound strange, but there's a value in being able to walk in somewhere anonymously.
5,000%.
You don't get.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to change direction a little bit. One of the best things you've done, and I thanked you before we started this show, is to really be an advocate for women and breast cancer. And I remember when some things changed, and it was right about the time or right after the time you sort of went out there and started push for people to understand that they have dense breast, to make sure that they get their mammography reports that tell them if they have dense breast. So give us a little bit of that and anything you want to advocate for women, because this is an all-woman audience. Use that wisdom and tell them how to take care of themselves.
So when I was diagnosed, I remember I did an interview with Dr. Susan Love, who wrote the breast book, May She Rest in Peace. And when they were changing lights or something, she said, "Miss Lunden, you do get your annual mammograms, right?" And I said, "Yeah, but I'm that person who's always sitting in the waiting room with my robe on, that they always call back in for more pictures." And I was, that's that time where we say, "Oh my God, did you see something?" But they always say the same thing. "No, it's just that your breasts are so dense, it's hard to see anything at all." And she said, "Well, then you can't just get a mammogram. You also have to get an ultrasound." And so I, afterwards marched into my gynecologist and I said, "I want, on my next mammogram, I want to get an ultrasound. Dr. Love told me." And the next time I went for my mammogram, and I got a 3D. The 3Ds are exponentially better. Always get the 3D. But I had a clean 3D mammogram that day. And then I walked across the hall, and I had an ultrasound, like she told me to do. And I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And I remembered that she had said, when you do a mammogram, dense breast tissue shows up white. So does a tumor. So it can mask a tumor. I remember she said it's kind of like looking for a snowball in the middle of a snowstorm. And all of a sudden I thought about it, like, I'm a smart girl, and I interview experts. And I didn't even know this. I didn't know how important it was that I needed to know my breast density. Like, all the time when they were saying that to me, I didn't know it was anything bad. I didn't know it was something that should perk me up. "Oh, wait, you mean I have dense breasts?" I didn't know that was a thing that we women needed to know. And so I just dove into it. And I started going to Washington with a bunch of women who were from Connecticut, a real grassroots effort to try to get mandatory mammogram reporting. And what that was is that every time for decades, that report would go to your referring physician, probably your gynecologist, but not to you. And you would get that letter. Nothing seems to be changed too much from your last one, blah, 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 blah. But the referring physician got the one that down at the end that said, "This woman has very dense breast tissue, and another test might be warranted." And I went back into my gynecologist and I said, I went to the radiologist. I got all the reports from 15 years. I said, "Why didn't you ever tell me that?" And he said, "Because I knew that the insurance wouldn't pay for it. So if I just didn't say anything, I didn't want the problem in my lap. The problem should be in the radiologist's lap." "Oh, so you just all kind of ignore it?" Meanwhile, it could be information that could save our life. And I mean, that just sent me on a mission. And I went to, so many times I went to Washington. We fought to get mandatory mammogram reporting. It took us, 5-6 years. We finally got it. And then all that did was to write legislation to tell the FDA to rewrite the rules. So then I went and testified in front of the FDA. And then it still took another 3 or 4 years to get those rules written. And I mean, I started working on that when I was first diagnosed. That was 11 years ago. That mandatory mammogram reporting only went into effect this past January. That's how long it took. But, if that's the thing I'm remembered for, like if that was on my tombstone, I'd be okay with that because it's so important. And if any woman right now is listening, first of all, you have to have a mammogram. Nobody can help you if you don't get tested. Knowledge is power when it comes to health. Get the 3D mammogram and then find out if you don't know if you have dense breasts. And there's no way you can know without having a mammogram. It's not just if you feel like you have lumpy breasts. That won't tell you. And if you're in it's divided into 4 categories. If you're in the third or fourth category, you need an ancillary test. It's probably going to be an ultrasound. And make sure that you get your referring physician to write that script. Or these days now, because of the legislation we got passed, really the radiology labs are now compelled to then. And by the way, the reason why we couldn't get it passed for so long is that everyone knew that the next domino would be that the insurance company had to pay for it. And the insurance lobby was a lot stronger than we were. Now, we're going after the second rung. We've already gotten it passed. I've testified before the Connecticut state legislature, and we've got it passed in Connecticut that the insurance companies have to pay. And once again, we're going state by state, but the insurance should pay for it. It's so ridiculous. Why not pay for it and find out that someone has like very, very early stage cancer rather than wait until they're stage 3 or stage 4 and then they're fighting for their life and you're paying $1 gazillion for their treatment? It makes no sense. Not to mention we're talking about women's lives. Sorry, put me on that grandstand. And
No, we need that, and I appreciate that. And I think just raising the awareness, I love it. So I did not know how involved you were until I read the book, and that made me feel, I appreciate it. Every woman certainly appreciates that. I want to just kind of change the direction slightly before we kind of close out. I'm going to say a few words, and I just want you to give me 1 or 2 word answers that may come to your mind that would give us a little bit more insights into who I already feel I've gotten to know so much better. Your greatest disappointment?
probably that I didn't get to interview Princess Diana. That was my one yet that nobody got her, but except for the one guy who betrayed her. But anyway.
Okay, that fair enough. What about your greatest joy?
Oh, my husband and my children.
You know what? He seems like a doll.
I am the best husband ever.
That's fabulous. I did enjoy reading about that in your courtship a little bit and how supportive he was, and just really, really, just very, very refreshing. And all of your children, too. 7 children now, correct?
Yes.
That's a lot of children, but that's so fulfilling. And then finally, who is Joan Lunden now? What does this chapter look like for you?
I'm incredibly satiated, fulfilled from this life well lived, this career that was so extraordinary. But now my life also has an incredibly rich family component to it that's really filled with love. And so I just feel like they always talk about having it all. I kind of feel like now I'm finding the point where maybe I can say I have it all. It's hard for women when you're working full time and have little kids to truly have it all. You can have some of it some of the time and some of it, but not all of it all of the time. But I'm in such a great place today. And if I don't work ever again, I'm like totally good with that. But so much comes my way because of the platform I had. It's hard not to say yes. I'm always working on. My husband, people say, "Oh, how are you enjoying retirement?" My husband says, "Please just tell them you're enjoying it. Don't try to tell them all the things you're doing."
Well, and I think that's sort of where I want to leave with my guests, my audience who listens, because a lot of them really just, don't explore the opportunities that are in front of them, mostly because of fear. So if you, having been through and reinvented so many times, could leave maybe 3 pieces of advice or action items for the women out there who may just not think they have it in themselves to reinvent, what would you say?
One of the chapter titles, Reinvention Never Retires. Want it more than you're afraid of it. And if you're fearful, take it. Like believe in yourself and have some confidence. And if you don't, fake it till you make it. And because it sometimes takes that to just, and I was always afraid of public speaking. Really afraid. Then I went on tour with Tony Robbins after leaving GMA, and all of a sudden, now I love public speaking. So I'm kind of a living example that you can turn a complete fear into a complete passion. And And so I leave you with that, because it's never too late to go for new chapters, and not just something you've done in the past. Like, you might be good at a lot of things that you just haven't tried.
I'm going to steal a mantra that I heard from her book, just say yes.
Oh,
So,
yes.
ladies, Joan has sat here with us, told us about her life, her love, having, left GMA at 46 and reinvented herself over and over and over again. So she's living proof you can do it. So for any of you out there who may be driving kids to a soccer game, maybe coming back from grocery shopping, thinking to yourself, you know what? I'm just too afraid to do it. Listen to Joan, okay? Ladies, if you like this show and if it brings you something that you think is valuable that other women need to hear, please like, share, comment, review the show, because that helps it find a bigger audience. So for any of you, again, who think that this is just not your time, that all just stops today. That stops right now, because you do not need permissions. You just need to get started.